y'all ready to head off the trail? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones. I'm ready to take you on a mysterious, incredible journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do, because we would love to have you. Shout out to Bumblefoot for that really cool music. And you guys be sure to follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. Also, you guys check out my store. It's on Etsy, and it's called War Woman Goods. You guys can also find some really cool merch on my website, okay? We have a fantastic guest tonight. I have John Vandeventer here in the studio tonight. Don't forget that right after this show, we have After Hours waiting to go with a great program set up for you guys tonight. So let's get to our guest. John Vandeventer has a lifelong fascination for military aircraft, which he developed as a young boy. This fascination led him to serving in the U.S. Air Force for 16 years. His fascination for military aircraft also led to another lifelong fascination with UFOs. John is the author of the Relics trilogy, a series of Sasquatch and UFO stories based in his hometown of Honobia, okay, not Honobia, or Honobia, and neighboring area Talahena, Oklahoma. Areas both known for a plethora of Sasquatch sightings and high strangeness. John has been a guest speaker as well as the MC of the Honobia Bigfoot Festival. I swore I was going to get that name right tonight. And I know the locals call it Honobia. It's spelled Honobia, everybody. So bear with me, okay? I would like to welcome to the show, Mr. John Vandeventer.
Hi, Jessica.
Hey, John. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is going to be fun.
I'm so glad to be here again. I appreciate it. And don't worry about saying Honobia wrong. I just found out this week after living up here in the Kiamichi Mountains, I've been saying Kiamichi wrong. So
well, how? Okay, so it's Kiamichi, because that was actually in one of your books that I was reading.
Yeah,
I was reading it this morning.
Well, supposedly you're supposed to pronounce it Kiamichi.
Kiamichi. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's like a bunch of towns we have here in the South. Okay. Down here in Georgia, we have a lot of places like what people would say Albany. We call it Albini. Okay. And Lagrange is Lagrange. Okay. So things like that. It's just Southern dialect. Okay. It's
right.
Just,
we
it's
did
just
it
regional,
Texas
right?
Before I moved here, you know, we had little towns in Texas like Nevada instead of Nevada, and the list goes on.
Well, you have such a wonderful series of these novels called the Relics. Okay, called Relics, and you also just published a youth novel called Shadow Chasers. And it's about the Rock Creek Wildman. I actually have my copy right here. And I have my Relics books right here as well. They are amazing. Now, I highly recommend anyone who's into Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and UFOs, please get those books, everybody. We're going to talk about them tonight a little bit. But, John, my question to you is, did you have a fascination with Bigfoot before you started writing these books? Or did you start writing them and then start getting interested in Bigfoot? What came first, the chicken or the egg?
I thought Bigfoot was kind of a neat subject, but I never really paid much attention to it. And how the whole book thing got started, at the time I was working as a technical writer at a steel mill, and I had this friend on a online flight sim we used to play, and he was telling a Bigfoot story one night. He had been to Florida as a child, and I guess a skunk ape down there, and they had an encounter. And I remember it was like there would be like 500 people on at a time, and we'd recreate battles, and we all took it way too serious, this online game. But we were supposed to be patrolling this area on the North African coast, and he started telling his Bigfoot story, and I looked over and saw a bunch of dots. I knew they were Germans, so I called them out, broke into them, and they just flew on down the coast talking about Bigfoot. And you know, my cyber feelings got hurt because I got shot down. So I was ranting on the radio to him about how stupid his Bigfoot sighting was. And next day, you know, after I returned to my normal age, I called him up and apologized. And he had a production company. He made those 30-minute infomercials. And one thing led to another. And he said, "Hey, could you write me a short story?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I've never written fiction, and I'm barely hanging in there as a technical writer." So anyway, after a while, he talked me into it, and the setting was going to be Ohio, where he lived. And I'd worked on it maybe 20 hours or so. And I really didn't know anything about Bigfoot. I was getting all my information from him. And then he calls me one day and he says, "Man, you got to shelf that. I just got a big contract in California." And he was going to make a lot of money. So I didn't really want to write it anyway. So I thought, okay, this is an easy out. And I set things aside. Well, my sister was visiting from Arkansas. And she married. We all grew up in Texas, and she married and left for Arkansas. I think it was about 67, and never came home. Her and her husband lived up in the hills up there. But she saw it and said, "You need to make this into a novel." And I was like, "You need to go back to Arkansas." I did not want to do it. And she kept at me and kept at me. And we were really close. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I really didn't know anything about Bigfoot. And I started just researching and listening to podcasts. And I needed an area. And there really wasn't any place good in Texas where I was. I was in Northeast Texas. And I ran across this story, the Siege of Honobia. And it fascinated me. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. Where is that? And I looked on a map, and it wasn't far away. It was about a 3-hour drive. And then I thought, well, I wanted to use it, but then I didn't want to use it because it's so small. I needed infrastructure. I needed a police department, a hospital, places to eat. I needed a better setting. So I just kind of saw Tallahena just to the north, chose Tallahena, and then it took me about 2 years to get the story written. And I got so engrossed in Bigfoot information, and I started buying books, and I was listening to everything I could. A couple of the first books I bought were David Paulides' Sasquatch books, Tribal Bigfoot, and the Hoopa Project, I think it was. And
I think a lot of people don't know that David Paulides was a Bigfoot field researcher.
Yes,
before he wrote the Missing 411 series.
Right. Yeah. And then I came across the Missing 411 series, and that just made everything even more interesting to me,
Yeah.
And so by then I was hooked. And then, I started reading about government cover-ups and military operations and things like that. And I was like, man, I want to use all this stuff. And I didn't intend for it to be such a big book, but I wanted to use all this. And I spent a lot of time trying to weave the story together. And so finally I got it published I turned it in 2016, and it came out in 2017, the original. And it did okay, but I didn't know how to sell or how to market books or myself. And I was just about to quit writing. I'd started on Relics 2 because my sister said, "Oh, you need a sequel." And I was just about to give up. And I was on a page in Facebook one night. It was a Nephilim group. And I was looking into that, and I ran across a lady that is part owner of Empire Publishers. And we struck up a conversation. And I don't know, 2 weeks later, I just decided I was going to publish my second book with her. And then I thought, well, what the heck? I want them to be alike. So I did the second edition of Relics, and it became Relics of Dark Autumn.
Yeah.
And that came out last October. And then Relics 2, the Honobia Remnant, came out in December. And Relics 3, the Lair of the Ancients, that'll be out mid-September this year. So I've been real happy with them. They've done a great job for me. And of course, I did the U series book with them too. And I mean, they've been wonderful. In fact, I quit my day job to just dedicate myself to writing. Lucky I'm old enough I get some Social Security to help out. But
you know what? Your books are amazing. I'm going to pull a couple of pictures up. Let's see if I can get them. I have pictures of your books. So if anyone's looking into, I highly recommend these books, everybody. They are the best Sasquatch books I've read. Okay. These are actually fiction. Okay. However, John, I've been doing Bigfoot field research for a long time, and I swore the first time that I finished this book, Relics, The Dark Autumn, I could have sworn you had some insider information. I thought maybe you worked in the government and knew something and were just kind of leaking it out in these books, because you were touching on things that I had information about and I had experienced, but I didn't know a lot of people knew about. Like,
well, thank you. I think I
yeah.
just really, I was on everything I could find about Bigfoot. And funny you say that, because I have a friend that has a podcast and he's out near Tallahena.
Yeah.
And he said he read my books and fell in love with them. He says, "You don't write fiction, you write faction." And I was like, "Okay, I'll take that."
It was, and that's what kind of blew me away. Was I didn't know your whole story when I first read your first book, and I thought, man, this guy really knows. And I knew that you had been in the Air Force for 16 years, and so I just figured maybe you had some insider information, because you really do touch on the Air Force, the military aspect of all this, and even with national parks, okay, and park rangers. Now, I can speak from experience. I've had state park rangers contact me to come and inspect and scout out their land and their parks, because they have so many Bigfoot sightings here in Georgia. Okay. I won't name the exact park, but I've been to at least one of these parks where they had, I think he said 8 Bigfoot sightings and reports in 1 month. Okay. And he told me also, he said, other people kind of deny it. He was having to write up reports and send them up to the higher ups. But nobody would talk about it. Okay. It was very hush hush there. So I found that interesting, because you touched on that.
It might just cut down the number of people going to parks if they knew there was a gigantic primate out there roaming around. Nobody knows if they're friendly or unfriendly. So who wants to test it?
Yeah.
I hear, you hear stories where people say, well, the thing attacked us, threw stuff at us. We're lucky we got out alive. And then you get the other end of the spectrum where, no, they braid my horse's hair and,
the witch knots. I don't know if we want to go there tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with those. We'll stay away from that subject tonight. Yeah. Okay. So if you know, okay. But yeah, it's really interesting though. You put so many aspects of things that my team has experienced into your books. Where do you get all of this information? I mean, I know you've had personal experience with Sasquatch, even on the property that you live on and around your home. Do you use those experiences?
No.
In your books?
When I wrote the original Relics, book 1, I was still in Texas, and I wrote most of book 2 here in Honobia, but it was just reading. And now I would find a story or something, and I would use little bits of it. I would take the situation and dramatize it in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a facelift, or I guess. But no, most of my ideas came from just reading books, listening to podcasts like yours,
Yeah.
And I was a copier tech, so I was driving 200 or 300 miles a day, and I spent more time driving from job to job than I did on the jobs. So I was free to listen to a lot of stuff and able to take a lot of things in every day. So
yeah. Well, I would love to hear about some of your personal experiences tonight, John. I know that you have actually seen a Bigfoot, and maybe it wasn't for very long. However, you saw one.
Yeah, I did.
It might have actually been friends with your dog, from what I recall.
Well, I know,
right?
I know. Well, it's funny because, like the UFO subject and Bigfoot, I found it all interesting. But my whole life, nothing ever happened that was strange or any high strangeness. But it was like as soon as I started studying and researching and going out in the field a little bit, things started happening. Funny thing is, when I wrote the first book, I didn't use the character names. I didn't use anybody that I knew or were related to. I didn't use their name. Mm-hmm. And one of the main characters, Monica, and I'd never known a Monica my whole life. And then just before I sent the book off,
you married one.
Monica. Now I'm married to her. She walks into my life. So that was like the beginning, and it was just like, maybe this is what I was supposed to do, and maybe I'm supposed to be seeing these things. I don't know why things started happening. At first, it was I was a bit embarrassed by it and didn't want to talk about it. But really, the first Bigfoot thing that happened, we'd been here, maybe just about a little over 3 months. As a matter of fact, tomorrow is the 4th anniversary of my Sasquatch sighting.
Oh,
So
happy anniversary.
Yeah. So August 7th, 2018, I went outside, and it was about this time, about 9 o'clock or so. And I went out and I was looking up at Mars, and I was petting a dog. And we have a motion detector for our lights outside. So as I walked around the Monica's car, I tripped the motion detector, and I was looking up at Mars. I wasn't paying any attention. Well, across the we own a little pad. We own about an acre across the road, and then we got 4 acres on this side. Well, my eyes picked up movement, and there's an old Choctaw church back there, and they have the big vapor lights. And, my eyes picked up movement, so automatically I'm looking at what's moving, and I see this thing, and it's, it's running from my left to my right, and it ran about 80 to 100 yards. And I still say it was around 4 seconds. I've never seen anything move that fast. And as soon as my eyes hit it, I knew what I was looking at. And it was just right off my property line over where they mow for that churchyard.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching it. I watched it leap. And the weirdest thing about the whole deal was it never pumped its arms. And I don't know why that sticks in my head, but it had like a surfer's stance or something similar, or somebody like going through high water and may hold their arms up.
Yeah.
Its arms were doing that. And the only time I saw it pump its arms was when it left. It left at the very end. I assumed it jumped over a fence. I went down the next morning and looked around. Actually, what it left over was a big pile of rocks and some old logs and stuff. And it would have come down. There's a little Choctaw cemetery there. It would have landed in that cemetery, but it was August, and it's like this August, we haven't had any rain, and the ground's packed. Plus, the ground here is hard anyway. It can rain all day today and be muddy, and by tomorrow afternoon, we got dust again. So we grow nice rocks here in Honobia.
Wow. So it could not have been a human, right? And it was on
No,
2
it wasn't a
feet.
human. Funny thing too, I had just been to Brown Springs. That was a Tuesday night, I believe.
Oh,
I
know
just
Brown
come back
Springs.
from Brown Springs and had been there over the weekend with some other guys, and didn't see anything, no prints, no nothing. Heard some weird cackling in the night, sounded like an old lady, but that was about it. And I've been in a place out, it's called Longpole, Arkansas. Never saw anything out there, but did find some tracks, but I was always uneasy out there. Yeah. And I remember when I came back from Brown Springs, I told Monica, I said, they may have been here at one time. I don't know. I said, but I don't think they're here because I don't get that uneasy feeling. And I just spent the weekend in Brown Springs, and all I got was, tick and chigger bites. And I really, I didn't think there was anything out there. But for some reason, Longpole, Arkansas gives me the creeps. So I just assumed they're not here anymore. So I had my sighting. I run into the door, and I tell Monica, you're not going to believe this. I just saw a Sasquatch. And she looks me in the eyes and goes, "Oh, John," and I'm like, "No, really." And she's like looking at me. And she's, "Okay, I believe you," and I don't think she did. And then I think
go take your meds and go to bed.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But then 3 months later, she saw one right in the same general place, but she had 2 other witnesses with her. So,
confirmation.
Yeah. And then I made the mistake of telling a couple of people. At the time, I thought it was a mistake. And, they started looking at you sideways. And I thought, I'm not going to talk about this. So I didn't say anything about it for about 2 years. I got on Sasquatch Chronicles like a couple of days after it happened. I didn't realize Wes Germer was a member of one of the Sasquatch groups I was a member of on Facebook. And I drew a little diagram and showed everybody, said, "Hey, here's what I saw." And he wanted me to be on his show. And I thought, man, I only saw the thing about 4 or 5 seconds. Yeah. I really didn't want to be on a show. I'd never been on a show before. So I went on, I told him. And then after that, I never spoke about it again for 2 years. And then finally, I don't know, it just hit me. It was like, no, you know what? I saw it. I'm not going to be bashful about it and just start talking about it. And so I had that sighting. Monica had her sighting. And then a strange thing would happen to me that same year. That was August when I had that sighting on the property line. Um, I would be coming home if I was working down in Texas. I'd be coming home from that direction, and about 10 miles from here, there's kind of an overlook. And I'm in my 60s now. I'm driving, doing all this driving, and I get sleepy. So to stay awake, I drink coffee all day to keep
Oh, yeah.
going.
We all do. We
Yeah,
all
and
do.
you got to get rid of your coffee after a while. So there's
Yeah.
some
Hey, it
days,
happens to the best of us.
yeah, I'm only 10 miles away, but I can't go any further. I'm gonna stop here. There's like a little cliff. So
Uh-huh.
one day I run out there, it's raining, and I'm, taking care of business. And I look down, there's a footprint right next to me, filling with water. And
Wow,
I'm
like
like,
a human,
whoa.
like a human print.
Yeah, no, you could
Barefoot?
tell
Yeah.
it was that, that weird flat, just kind of,
Oh, yeah.
I could
Like
tell
just
what it
never
was.
worn shoes before. Yeah.
It dwarfed my foot. And I had boots on, and I remember thinking, dude, you got to remember where you live and start being a little more aware. So
Right.
didn't think much of it. It was a cool story. Hey, there was a footprint, but it was full of water, and I didn't have any plaster anyway. And it was raining and cold. It was December. Well, then just a couple of months later, I think it was either late February or early March. This really beautiful day, and I had to stop there again. Sun was shining, but the leaves were out and the trees were full again. And here I go again, and now I get this just god awful whistle. I mean, it sounded like a human whistle, but I mean, just 10 times louder. I jumped. I think my feet left the ground, and I just said, "Okay, I'm done."
Oh,
I just got in the
wow.
car and left, and it sounded like it wasn't any more than 50, 60 feet away. I mean, it was right in those trees, and the level of it and stuff. I didn't want to go peeking in the trees. I figured, hey, it's either whistling at me to leave or it's whistling for another one. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's time for John to go.
Well, and if you're referencing back to your book, especially the first relics, you know that they're portrayed as being pretty violent. Okay,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so yeah, so you'd have to take caution, I would believe.
yeah. And that's funny because then just a couple of months after that, it was around May. I developed a oil leak in this little Toyota I was driving for a work car. And so I stopped into Queen, Arkansas, and I sprayed off the engine because I had some oil buildup on it, and I could smell it, and I wanted to get rid of the smell. Drove on home. It wasn't a bad oil leak, just annoying. And so I'm starting to come up the mountains toward Honobia from Bethel, and it starts raining. And so I hit my windshield wipers. Well, when I cleaned off the engine, I sprayed oil up on my windshield wipers, so they're just smearing oil. I can't see. So
That's a
I'm,
bad
going
combo.
along about 5 miles an hour. I keep hitting the windshield wash, trying to get it to go away, trying to get it to go away. Finally, it clears, and I look over, and there's these two big red legs standing in some pine trees, and they just walk back into the pine tree. And I'm thinking the thing
Wow.
may have crossed right in front of me, and I couldn't see it. And I was only doing like 5 miles an hour.
Wow.
So I sped up, got there maybe, I don't know, maybe 30 yards from where I was. Got there, and I'm trying to look in the woods and see, and it's dark, it's dark and cloudy, and the woods are dark. And what you just said in my head, I thought, yeah, dummy, just sit here and get hit in the head with a rock. So I ended up taking off.
I
And
know.
that was,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
and that was really my last experience there. And again, yes, I saw two big legs with Sasquatch. I don't know. I don't think they were human looking legs, and I just don't know. I can't say. But that one I did not get a good look at. We get
Yeah.
vocalizations up here. We did for the first couple of years. They started logging heavier in the mountains here. Honobia actually sits in a little mile wide canyon between we call it North Range and South Range behind me here. And we would get them from time to time. And, you hear tales of other people might see something or find a track but it's been a cool
Yeah.
place to live. It really has.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe the hotbed of activity that is in Oklahoma. It's everywhere. Now, you mentioned in your books and you've mentioned even the graveyard down from your house and a lot of this land. has a very big Native American presence there.
Yes.
Now, do you think that has something to do with all of the Sasquatch activity in that
Well,
area?
I think it could. The Choctaw folks that are here now, I think it was the Caddo and the Osage were the original tribes in this area, and then they had the Trail of Tears and moved the Choctaw from Alabama, Mississippi, and they had the Champay and the Ochlachita. Ochlachita was like, I think that just means big person, and then the Champay was more of they considered it kind of an evil spirit, but they described it as a large hairy ogre. And I've since found out that it depends on what part of the Choctaw Nation you're in. Like here in Honobia, I'm pretty much in the heart of the Choctaw Nation, but if I go north up toward Spiro or someplace like that, they may call it something else.
Oh yeah.
Even though it's the same tribe, they may have another name for it. 12 miles from here at Bethel, my wife took a job at one of the schools in the area, and the principal there, he was talking about it, and he said, well, I'd never heard of Sasquatch, but I heard of the hairy man. We called him the hairy man there.
Yeah.
They didn't even use the term Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And I could see how that could happen. I was so ignorant of the whole subject of Sasquatch when I started researching it. I'm sure you remember the legend of Boggy Creek. Well,
I sure do.
Yeah, I saw that as a kid. And all those years until 2015, when I started researching for the book, I didn't ever associate the legend of Boggy Creek with Bigfoot. I just thought it was some monster story. And then I remember coming across and goes, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I got to meet Keith Crabtree
at
the Alabama Bigfoot conference, and he and my son became good friends. Okay, of course, my son was all over the place. He's 8 years old, everybody, by the way, and so Keith. If you're watching tonight or whenever, Keith, hey, what's up? He actually watches our show sometimes. So he played the the Foot Monster or the Bobby Creek Monster. Yeah. He that was him. So
well, funny story about Fout. It took me 4 months to get a date with Monica after we first met. So
you had to work hard for her.
I did.
I like that.
She's a very spiritual person, and she's in the Bible, reads every morning. She studies ancient Hebrew. She's in the Old Testament, and she's an avid reader of this stuff, and so she's in there every day. And so she's asking me, we lived in Sulphur Springs, and I want to take her to Texarkana, better restaurants, bigger city, nicer place. So we're driving. She says, so what's this book about you're writing? I'm not telling her. I'm like, that'll be a short day. Hey, I wrote a Sasquatch book, and okay, you can take me home now. So I kept kind of him on around. Finally, I just said, it's a novel based on Sasquatch. And I was waiting for it, and, because the other people I worked with, had been teasing me for 2 years about writing a Sasquatch book. So I'm waiting for the joke or whatever. And she just says, she goes, I've always wondered if those things exist. I wonder if they might be a form of Nephilim.
Yeah.
And I said, Nephil what? And she said, Nephilim. Have you ever read the Bible? And I said, no. And she goes, well, you should. And I was like, okay. So I asked her some more about it. But funny thing, once the subject got out, our first date, we blew right through Texarkana and went to Falk. And I took her to the Monster Mart and all that stuff there. And we took some pictures and stuff. We did finally go back to Texarkana for dinner. But so we kind of had a Bigfoot date on the very first date.
Hey, that's a good way to start off. I like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. I love it. I actually really appreciate the biblical aspect to a lot of this paranormal activity that we have. And, I do shows with the guys from Texas Front Porch, and my friend Jason McLean is on there. And I love doing shows with him because he's a biblical scholar, and he really ties it all together when it comes to the Nephilim. Nephilim. I can't pronounce it.
Well, it became necessary for me to find other subjects because, especially with the size of book Relics 1 was, I'm pretty much emptied my bag of Bigfoot tricks there. So
Yeah.
when I went into 2, I listened to what Monica had said, and I started reading it a little bit myself. And then I started listening to guys like L.A. Marzulli and things like that. So I decided to take the next 2 books that direction. I'm kind of eased Nephilim into book 2. There's still Sasquatch, and I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but I just won't say it. But in book 1, everybody's convinced Sasquatch is this bad thing.
Yeah.
By the time book 2 comes around, you kind of figure out that wasn't Sasquatch. Here's the real Sasquatch. And so I'm taking it even further in book 3, which will be out in September, and get into a little more Nephilim stuff and a fallen angel, ancient Mesopotamian gods, and just going to wrap it up. And then once Relics is done with Relics 3, I'm taking most of the characters into another series, and they'll be going into things other than Bigfoot. I mean, there still may be Bigfoot books in the future, but we're going to go look at other paranormal stuff. So.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, so I find this really interesting that for centuries there's been reports of dog-headed men and hairy men and things like that. Well, I was I do a show on Fridays where I remote view paranormal attacks, and there was one out of my home state of Georgia from 1829, and it was the Okefenokee. Well, it was called the Bigfoot attack in the Okefenokee swamp. Not too far from Valdosta. Okay, I believe you might live down there. Yeah, and so I remote viewed this incident where 5 hunters were allegedly killed by what I thought was a Bigfoot. But I went in and I remote viewed this, and it turned out to be a giant human, like a 12-foot tall human. Yeah, and there was a race of them that lived in the swamp. And it was pretty well known, especially by the Native American tribes that live down there. I believe that's kind of Seminole area down that area in the creeks. Yeah. And so it's right there on the Florida border. But it was what I thought I was going to be remote viewing Bigfoot. It was giants. It was, something different. And so it really caught my attention. And I'm finding that more often. It's really fascinating, all of the different cryptids that we have throughout history, just here in our United States. So yeah,
I enjoyed being. I was there 2 years, like I was telling you earlier. The last 2 years, I was in the Air Force. I might have liked it more, but I'd been in Tucson in the desert for 9 years. And then all of a sudden I go from that dry heat to that wet heat in Valdosta, and I couldn't stand the wet heat,
And the gnats.
And the love bugs, we call them.
Oh yeah. No, I went to school. I went to college down at Georgia Southern, and it's below the gnat line. Okay. And it was hot, and it's hot and humid now. Okay. And I live above the gnat line, but it's it can be pretty miserable down that way. So yeah, I know. As a matter of fact, I actually went Bigfooting yesterday with my team. I took my son out. And you know what? Let me pull a picture up right quick, because by the way, before we get into your next book, you did send my son a copy of Shadow Chasers. This is my son. And well, I actually read the book. My son is only in 2nd grade. It was just a tiny bit above his reading level right now, but he's going to read it maybe next year. Okay. Or maybe at the end of this year. But yeah, I took him Bigfooting yesterday, and this was my son.
I love that. I saw that picture earlier. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was so hot. Let me tell y'all. And this is him with all his sweat, and it rained on us a little bit, but it's hot out there, y'all. It's hot, and he had on about 5 layers of clothing yesterday because he wanted to wear 5 layers of clothing for some reason. But yeah, we have to be careful down here in the South. It's hot, so and muggy. But yeah, so do you get out and do research out in Oklahoma? I mean, I know you had mentioned before to me that you and your sons had gone to Brown Springs, and I have friends that go and research Brown Springs regularly, and there's a lot of activity out there, and it's very dark. Okay,
it is dark there.
Yeah, it's dark. Kind of tell me a little bit about Brown Springs and your experiences you've had there.
Well, Brown Springs has been it's been a nothing burger for me, but that's me. I mean, I know people have been out there and had experiences, and I mean, it's one of the places you're almost scared to go to when you hear the reputation. And the first time I went, yeah, I took my youngest son Trevor, and then my second oldest son Thomas. He's in a wheelchair. He lost both legs in Iraq, and so we went. He wanted to go, and so we got down there, and the reputation was so bad, and the ground was kind of rough. I was thinking, can you get your wheelchair through this stuff? He goes, nah, I'll just stay in the truck. And I told Trevor, I said, well, we won't be gone long because I don't want to leave you in the truck. Well, he just got a new Judge pistol the day before. He's like, no, stay all you want. I might get a chance to use this thing. So
That's
anyway,
exciting.
yeah, we walked down to the river. We didn't find any tracks and messed around for a bit. And then, kind of headed back. The second time I was there for a weekend with some guys that go out all the time, Bigfoot hunting. And we found like some structure looking stuff, but it's like I found a bunch of stacked rocks one time out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm thinking, I don't think any humans been through here, wasn't any signs, but I can't be sure, so I can't say. I'm kind of that way with structures too. I look at it and go, yeah, but a human could do that. But the weirdest thing we had was just like a witch's cackle that came back from by the road. We were about halfway between the road and the river, and it was funny. We heard that cackle, and well, there's a casino about a mile up the road from there, and so we assumed, somebody out of the casino or something. Yeah. And then about 40 minutes later, that cackle came from like the bank of the river, so she had gotten past us somehow. And
that's scary.
Yeah, that was the weirdest thing that happened.
We've actually experienced witches in the woods, like folklore witches. There's a very pretty well-known witch in Cherokee folklore called Spearfinger. Okay, and we've actually experienced something like Spearfinger out in the woods before. Okay, and so I don't know. I won't get into that story tonight.
Well, yeah, but that's impossible. I wish I could remember the name. Somebody called it. I was on another podcast. 6 months ago. So, and it was fun. We spent more time making jokes than we did talking about anything. So it kind of derailed, but we had a good time. And I wish I could remember what they called that. But yeah, it did. It sounded like your just generic television witch's cackle. That's what it sounded like.
You never know what you're going to experience out in those woods. Okay, No War with Bigfoots. Thank you so much for that super chat. You're really sweet. We appreciate that at Spaced Out Radio. So thank you. Yeah. Now you have a whole new element too. Not only do you have Bigfoots in your books, but we've got a little bit of UFO activity going on. Okay. And I wanted to know, considering you were in the Air Force for so long, did you have any kind of experience, let's just say, because I was convinced you had insider information when I read your books, okay, but not just at the Air Force, but have you ever had any personal UFO experiences?
Well, not in the Air Force. The closest thing I ever had happen in the Air Force, you've heard of Rendlesham Forest and Bentwaters, where it was, I think it was December 28th, 1980. Well, I was over there then, but I wasn't at that base. I was at an F-111 base, so that would have been my closest thing to do with the Air Force. Yeah. Actually, yes, I have, and it's all been recent. And that's the kind of I've seen lights when I was a kid, or I'd be out with my dad and we'd see something kind of weird, but you can say, well, that might be an airplane, it might not be. But the weirdest thing happened. It was the September, just before we moved out here, and we had put a big above ground pool in the backyard in Sulphur Springs, and it was a Friday evening, and I was out cleaning the pool and changing the chemicals and just swimming around, and Monica was asking me a question about something, so I swam over to where she was, and I'm just kind of got my arms over and I'm looking up at her because she's standing up, I'm down on my knees in the pool.
Yeah.
I see this star behind her head, like Ziggy doing this kind of thing. And I'm thinking it's chlorine or chemicals, so I'm wiping my eyes clean and I look again, and now it's doing like a triangle pattern. And I'm like, Monica, look, look, look. I'm like screaming and pointing. And by the time she turns around, she sees it. But when she sees it, it took off to the west. I mean, it just shot off to the west. I watched it. She watched it. And she was like, what's that? And I said, I don't know. And then when I turned, and this is where it gets really, really weird. I turned and I looked back and I see this thing, this humanoid looking thing floating in the sky. Now, it's bad enough to see a UFO, but I got to turn around and see this too. And it was weird because it had to be 2,000 to 3,000 feet up, but it was like I could see every detail. And he had like a mask that was like triangular kind of. And he had like a dark beige gown and dark beige wings. And it was like a gown, but I didn't get an angel vibe at all. It was like, it looked to me like something out of a Marvel comic book or something. It was just strange. Wow. And then it just kind of dissipated like a cloud was. It was solid. I was looking at it and it was solid. And I'm starting to yell and point at that. And then it just dissipates. So, wow. and that was before we even got out of here. So that just freaked me out totally. I was all excited about the star thing, the humanoid thing. And that was another thing. I didn't tell anybody about that for a while. And then funny thing, had a UFO sighting out here last August. And I decided I'm going to report this to MUFON. So when I did, the lady started asking, well, have you had any more? And I said, yeah, but I don't really. And she goes, well, I'd like to hear them. Where was it? And I told her about the humanoid. And she goes, we get that all the time.
No way.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That is so cool.
I've never heard it either. So yeah.
Well, so you're not the only one that saw it. So no war with Bigfoot. Thank you again for another super chat here. She said, John has a lot of cloaked Sasquatch around the house and at the Choctaw Cemetery, 10 yards from his house, plus many human spirits. I showed him them, is what she said. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, she took some pictures I posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you know how some people got that ability, they can see those things. And me, I need 4 red circles and a magnifying glass. So
right.
Yeah, I think it was I don't know. It was quite a while back. She was sending me pictures of stuff and I was like, wow, I just see trees until somebody points that stuff out.
Yeah. So you have a lot of activity around your home. That says a lot though. And if I remember correctly, I think I remember you saying that the woman who owned your property before you, she went on to open a Bigfoot museum and she had Bigfoot activity on your property before.
Yeah. And that's a funny thing. Never met her until after I had my sighting here. And Monica had hers, and we met her. Actually, we met in a church in Tallahena, and got to talking to him. And her and her husband came up one day, and we had lunch. And she started telling us about her experiences up here. And she said that she could speak with them. They were communicating through her mind or telepathically. And she said they didn't mean her any harm or anybody any harm, but the tears would just be rolling down her face. I mean, she just had this reaction, and it was pretty profound, and then then I'm like, okay, so it's happened to somebody else. It's not just us here. So that was pretty wild to hear that from her.
Well, I think that just backs up that you are having experiences there. And, when you told me that before, I thought, man, that's pretty profound in my opinion, because that shows that there's been a history of it on your property.
Right.
And you're not crazy, obviously.
No, thank goodness. As far as I know.
Not as far as this goes, right?
It depends on who we give a vote to. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I just love, the fact that you base your novels in a small town, and it's basically the town where you live. Okay. And there's a lot of politics that go on in these small towns. And when you have something as profound and as big as a Bigfoot sighting, it can throw the town into a tizzy, as they say,
Right.
and really be stressful on everybody there. And the camera crews start coming in, and people want to film. But a lot of towns will actually use that to their advantage. We got, for example, the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp. They have a Lizard Man conference every year, and in Honobia, I think I
Yeah,
said that right.
we have
Y'all
our
have a Bigfoot
Sasquatch.
festival.
Yeah, we do
Yeah,
the first weekend in October every year. And
yeah,
I've met quite a few people in Talahena that have had Sasquatch sightings. And some of these go back to the 70s and when they were children and stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, it's been I didn't bring Sasquatch with me. They've been up here, and there's a whole history of it. So it was just I just was blessed I found it, and there's all this rich history to pull from and write stories about. So
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that there's so much activity concentrated right there? And even in Brown Springs and Talahena like I asked you earlier, do you think it has something to do with the Native American
it
the
very
concentration
well
there? Or is it the terrain
could
or
be
yeah.
Native Americans, but there is a lot of wilderness here. I mean, a
Okay.
lot. 17 miles to a gas station from where we live.
To a gas
miles,
station.
45 miles to a Walmart. So yeah, so
That sounds
there's a lot of
awesome.
wilderness here, and we got everything from bear and wolf and all kinds of critters here. Funny thing, I've got something for people now to say, well, if you saw Sasquatch, why didn't you get a picture of it? A couple of years ago, I was coming home from work. I'd been down in Texas, coming through that same road through Bethel, and I saw these 3 bear cubs on the side of the road. And by the time I could stop my vehicle, get my phone and put it on camera and put it up, and they weren't in any big hurry, but they got across the road and into the trees, and I couldn't get a picture of them. And they weren't even panicked, It's just, I mean, if you can't get a picture of bear cubs.
I know. Good luck. I mean, and it's just like finding a body of a Sasquatch. Like I like to tell people, I've never come across a body of a black bear or, a lot of these big animals that die in the woods,
Right.
because their bodies get dispersed so quickly, they disintegrate and they go back into the earth, and the animals eat off of them, and the vultures take them, and so there. Also, I believe there's a paranormal aspect to Bigfoot and Sasquatch. How do you feel about that, John? Do you think that there's
Yeah,
an X factor?
I think there is. I know there's the primate side and the paranormal side. And when I first started studying, I was hardcore primate. It's a primate, something we haven't found. If it's out there, that's what it is. But then the more I read, and then I found out about my sister and her husband's experience. They actually had the disappearing track phenomenon. So, and I didn't know any of this. She waited until I finished the book before she told me their story. So,
Oh yeah,
and do you ever see that show? What is Expedition Bigfoot? Did you
I've
watch that?
heard of it. Yeah, I've seen an episode or two.
Well, usually I don't watch it,
Yeah.
but they're pretty heavy on the primate. That's what they're
Mhm.
concentrating on.
A lot of those shows are.
Yeah,
They're not ready for what we got to tell them. The
right.
boots on the ground people like
So
myself.
this year I caught a couple of episodes, and there was one where they had a shadow. You can see the shadow of this Bigfoot. It was like down in a riverbed. You can see the shadow of it run along the side of the opposite bank. Perfect
Uh-huh.
shadow. Only problem is there's nothing there to make the shadow. There's no solid body that's
Mhm.
blocking light to cast that
Yeah.
shadow. And then it happened again in the daylight behind one of the guys in a group of trees. Again, a shadow, and there's nothing there blocking light to make the shadow. And now they're even starting to question what it is, so
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so much weirdness and high strangeness in regards to Bigfoot, Sasquatch. It's just not explainable, and I really do stand behind. I love Ron Moorhead's book, The Quantum Bigfoot,
right.
and I highly recommend that to people when it comes to real Sasquatch research on the X factor to Bigfoot. So it's if I were to write a book, he already wrote the book for me, because that's what I would have written. It's about what
Well,
he wrote.
funny
Yeah.
thing too, I think he was pretty much a dyed-in-the-wool primate guy at first too.
Yeah.
And then when you go to Quantum Bigfoot,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a wonderful guy. I got to talk to him a little bit one year up here. He was speaking. I think I spoke before him. It was like the garage band that opens for the big band. So,
Right. Well,
but
yeah, you got the MC one of those.
yeah,
right?
well, yeah. Now I'm doing the MC thing. I can do less damage that way. But he's a wonderful gentleman, very easy to talk to, and I really enjoyed meeting him.
Yeah. Yeah. I had him on the show. He's a friend of Spaced Out Radio.
Is he? Good.
He is.
Well, I'd already had his book. I got him to sign my book, and I was glad because it was, it was dog-eared and worn. He could tell I'd been reading it a lot.
I know. Just like your books, I actually have your books here, and I literally have Post-it notes like stuck on all the pages, because there's so much that I could relate to in your Relic series, and honestly, your Shadow Chasers as well. This is for my son's copy, and I could just relate to so much of it, being a field researcher. Like I said, I'm not shocked, but I was really impressed that you were really hitting the nail on the head on a lot of those points about Sasquatch. And another thing is that I found in your books is a lot of times Sasquatch gets blamed for a lot of this violence and things like that. And what I've been finding with my remote viewing is that a lot of times they're just the culprit when
Right.
it's something else doing all this violence. But every case is different.
Yeah, I know. Like, I don't want to give a spoiler alert in case anybody wants to read the book.
It's all different. Every case is different. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
They got a bum rap in the first book.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I love the series. And you even bring in characters who, in your Relics too, a man that was involved in Project High Jump and all these, secret, programs with our government and our military and things that really have a historical backing to them, which I found really interesting.
I love that. I love when I build the characters, and you're talking about Josh in the show, but the character. And I have an absolute World War II military aviation has always been my favorite subject. And going back to Operation High Jump right after World War II and a naval aviation, it allowed me to talk about, the airplanes of that era and add it to the story. And I really enjoyed his character and writing about him.
Oh yeah. John, I had so many pictures to pull up tonight, and I didn't pull up hardly any of them because we've just been talking. It's been flowing so well tonight. And we have about 3 or 4 minutes left tonight. And where can people find your book? And now, do you have a website where people can get it?
Yeah, you can find them on Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble, or you can go to my website, and it's www.relicsbook.com. Relics with an S, book singular.com. And there's links there for whatever format you want to purchase on the books.
Wrong one. Hold on, sorry. I hit the wrong button. That was from last week. Okay, we got relicsbook.com.
Right. Also, if anybody's interested, starting at midnight tonight and running till 11:59 Tuesday evening, if you want to download the Kindle of Relics 2, the Honobia Remnant, it'll be free for the next 72 hours, starting at midnight tonight Pacific.
I think I have a picture of that. Okay. Yeah. I caught that on your site today. And so I went ahead and uploaded that picture. So yeah, you guys please go to Kindle. And you will not be disappointed. I tell you, I just love the series, and so you have a third Relics coming out too. Right. When is this due out?
Mid-September.
Okay, mid-September. That's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. And let me show one more time before we go. Relics, the Dark Autumn, and the Honobia. Everybody is Honobia. Okay. Not Honobia, the Remnant. And this is the one with the UFO aspect to it. Just a great series, John. And I really enjoy it. I can't wait to read the third one. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. I had this one thing I wanted to bring up tonight, but I'm not sure we're gonna have a whole lot of time. But you're out in Oklahoma, and you guys had a state House representative that tried to do he tried to pass a bill to make it open hunting season on Bigfoot out in your state. How did you feel about that?
I thought somebody's going to get shot. I thought, okay, you got people with guns going out looking for two-legged creatures, and somebody's going to get shot. I don't know. I think it was
never a good idea, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Whatever it is, I'm really not for shooting it. You know,
it's that can be bad. Anything if you're walking on two legs and or you're looking to shoot something that's bipedal.
Yeah,
that's a horrible idea, especially for people that are out in the woods hunting and doing
exactly. That was my thought. Okay, you got everybody out hunting something on two legs. Yeah.
Probably not the best idea.
Well, quick follow up. I just read something this week where they've come back and doubled the bounty if you bring one in alive. So,
oh my gosh.
So good luck.
They kind of backtracked on it a couple of times because at first it was like, let's get one, you bag it or whatever, bag it and tag it, and which was horrible. And then it was like, oh, well, it needs to be unharmed, and now it's, I guess they're just backtracking because I could imagine there's been a little backlash for that. But
I think there was. We actually had him here in Honobia last fall. He showed up. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I can understand that it brings a lot of attention. I mean, we're talking about it right now. So it brings a lot of attention to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Oklahoma. So I guess it's a win as far as any publicity is good publicity.
There you go.
but at the same time, it's a little sad. So
that's what my publisher said. Don't worry if you get a bad review, because sometimes people see a bad review and want to read the book, see what the problem is.
Exactly. Thank you. And it's okay. I mean, I may get a bad comment every now and then on my YouTube videos. Who knows? But at least they took the time to watch and to leave me a comment. It's always a win. Okay. Well, John, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been
my
a blast.
pleasure. I love being on your show. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that you'll come back and, as soon as you get your third book published, come on back. Let's talk some more Honobia Bigfoots. Okay. I would love to have you back. Okay?
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, listen, have a great night. Okay. And I'll see you soon. You good? Right. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, y'all. That was awesome. I just love John. Don't forget that right after this show, you guys can join the After Hours crew. They're going to take you on an incredible journey for the next 3 hours. Tomorrow night on Off the Trails, my guest is longtime paranormal researcher and author Dennis Carroll, and we'll be talking about werewolves and demonology. I can't wait to see y'all there. But for now, I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm headed off the trail. And I will see you guys tomorrow night. Y'all have a good night. Bye.